gather your party before venturing forth.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Happy Hour. Once again, I'm your humble bartender, and today I'm here to tell you a story. Well, kinda. We're gonna be talking about character sheets, basically, and you might be asking yourself, why are we doing this? Character sheets, obvious, but some people out there actually get kind of confused sometimes, and I mean, it's good to have the information out. But yeah, I'm here to tell you the story of Bob the Human Fighter. Why? Because there was a statistic that came out, I think it was a week ago, and it stated that the most played character right now in Dungeons and Dragons is actually the Human Fighter. So, yeah, that and I play a human fighter. Anyways, creativity conundrums aside, Bob is actually kind of like a staple character. He's most of my city guards that I use in my adventures, just because. Besides, he's a cool guy, and I'm gonna use him and his story to show you what character sheets are like, especially the standard ones, and how you can actually go about using one. What are the important things? Once again, we're kind of tying this with the creation videos and how to derive your stats. All of this is going to come into play, and don't forget, there's a guy or girl out there who's going to be your dungeon master. Feel free to always ask the questions and do the stat allocation with them present if you don't feel confident. But with that out of the way, what is it about Bob that makes him such a cool dude? Well, number one, if you look at the character sheet, he's got this simple short name, Bob, and that's where you put it, right there in character name. Why do you have an entire field? Well, just because character sheets are, well, portable. They're pieces of paper, so you might want to, give this to somebody else or give it to your DM when the game is done. Some DMs like to do that, and it's good to have your character name. Moving straight to the right, you're gonna see class and level. Obviously, Bob is a level 2 fighter. Why? Well, because he used to be this soldier guy back in the day. He used to fight in the army of the king, but then he caught an arrow to the elbow. Not the knee, because that's Skyrim. They might copyright. But he used to be a soldier, and that's his background. Now you're gonna notice that I said Bob the city guard, but his background is a soldier, and it's important not to mix those up. Your current occupation, your current status in the world might not exactly be correspondent to your background, just because a background is supposed to be a story. And backgrounds are important, yeah, because they sometimes are actually more important than what class you're playing. A background can be an entire story in itself. There are additional pieces to the character sheet that will allow you to even write down a short story if you want, or you can just do that without the necessity of a character sheet. Right next to the background is player name, and this is where you write whatever your name is, like Steve or Brian or Megan. That's fine, just to have it in there to show that this is your sheet. And then right below, you're gonna see the race. Now, Bob, we're gonna use the variant human, just because number one, I like and I enjoy the variant human. I always allow it. And number two, because Bob would not work if he was any other race. Just think about it. Next to the race is the alignment, and Bob is actually gonna be neutral good. Why? Because, well, yeah, I mean, there are these laws that he's supposed to protect, but he's also kind of shady sometimes. Guards like to do these things like gambling and, cockfights and, other shady stuff. So he's not exactly the paragon of the group, but, he gets the job done. Bob is a multifaceted guy. And then straight to the right, one more field that's going to be very, very important for your adventures is the experience points. You just write down the number in there and keep adding onto it. That is to say that experience points in 5th edition, and actually I'm not certain, and I think it's in every edition, are cumulative, in the sense that you never get to remove them, or at least unless your DM has this interesting specific idea. But generally, looking at the rules, you're never gonna have to roll that number back or set it back to 0 just to get to the number for the next level. You just keep adding, and every time you hit a level marker, you get to level up. So with that out of the way, that's the whole bracket up above. Let's get to the ability scores, because they are the foundation of every character. And for Bob, we're gonna do a little preset thing. Now keep in mind, your scores may differ, actually most probably will differ, but we're just gonna have these in here just to kind of show how the calculations are done. So strength 16, that's a modifier of +3. Dexterity, that's 8 -1. Constitution 15, yeah, Bob likes them steaks. So that's a +2. Intelligence, that's 10 and a modifier of 0. Hey, don't judge. Bob is not paid to think all that much, actually. Wisdom 14, so that's a +2 modifier, and then charisma. That's a 12 and a +1. So Bob is one of those guys that's really good with his hands. Kind of has that rugged look, you know. This guy who may be in a deodorant commercial or something, but kind of, you know, feel what I'm going for. Moving straight next to the ability scores, you get inspiration, and like suddenly you move from ability scores to inspiration. What is this? Well, go ahead, read the rules, and then talk to your DM, and you have to figure it out between yourselves, because DMs have a very different approach sometimes to inspiration. But the basic gist of it is this is a resource. You can have one every 24 hours. That's the way it's written, and it's kind of like in real life. When you have inspiration in real life, you can do something that you're not particularly good at otherwise, or you know, you're just let's say not in the position to do in a general setting. But when you're inspired, then my friend, the world is your oyster. Right below inspiration is proficiency bonus, and because Bob is a level 2 fighter, that means he's got a proficiency of +2. Now, if Bob survives to ever be a level 5, he's gonna get a bunch of cool bonuses, but he's also gonna get a passive increase in proficiency, and that's gonna make it a +3, and that means you have to recalculate everything else that is done with proficiency. Trust me, with time, this is not gonna be such a chore. Actually, it starts to give you this sense of pride, just because, hey, kind of like Bob, you're, you know, growing up in the world. Below the proficiency bonus is the saving throws and skills, and all of them kind of work the same way, in the sense that you're gonna see this tick box, this little check mark left of the statistic, and that is meant to show you what you're proficient in. So in Bob's case, because he's a fighter, he gets to be proficient in strength and constitution saving throws at all times, forever. And the calculation is actually very simple. You take the modifier for strength, which is a +3 in Bob's case, and then you add the proficiency bonus, so that's a +2, ending up with a total of +5. Every time you need to make a strength saving throw, roll the d20 and add that 5 onto the roll, and if it beats the difficulty of whatever's going on, maybe the spell or the ability that's being thrown at you, then you succeed. If it's below, you fail. Now, Bob has failed a few saving throws in his day, but that's a story for another time. What happens if you're not proficient? Well, you just add the modifier. So let's say dexterity. In Bob's case, he's not proficient in dexterity saving throws. He's kind of getting on in age. Besides, all those stakes, not really good for the joints, especially when you're doing patrol. So he's got an 8, and that's a -1. So you just add that -1 in there and do the same thing with the d20. Roll, subtract 1, and, you know, pray. Now, keep in mind, I'm gonna say this right here, DMs are not omnipotent, in the sense that they also need money sometimes, or a favor done, or you know, some other kind of a bargain. So if you ever if you're ever in a position to lose your character, then just keep that in mind. But moving past that, you kind of get the point. Every saving throw is calculated like that. And then skills. Now skills, quite the mixed bag of things, starting from acrobatics and ending up with things like insight and nature. What's this all about? We're gonna have a video where we talk about more about skills and how they come into play. But let's look at Bob. Bob is proficient in five skills. Why 5, you might ask? Well, because he gets 2 from his background, which is a soldier, and those are always preset, so that's athletics and intimidation. But then he also gets to choose 2 from his class, which is a fighter. So let's say that Bob chose investigation and medicine, just because it makes sense. You know, sometimes guards have to investigate or pretend to, and medicine because, hey, way back when on the battlefields, Bob kind of had to learn how to, you know, triage and do a few things. And then lastly, why the 5th one? Because Bob is a variant human, that means that he gets to add 1 skill from his race right off the bat. And for Bob, we chose perception, because you cannot in any way have a guard without perception. I mean, well, you can, but then the whole thing with "hold, who goes there" is kind of wasted. Right below that is passive wisdom. Now, many people actually that have played D&D 5th edition for some time now still don't kind of know what this is about. And the basic gist of it is this: how do you passively perceive something? Well, think about your everyday experience. You're not aware of every single thing around you at all times, ever. Like, unless you're heavily autistic, and I joke about that in no way. But you kind of get the point. You don't always look for a specific sound or stare off into the distance to see something on the horizon. Oh, this is passive perception. This is passive wisdom, and it comes into play when somebody's trying to sneak up on you. You know, last guy that sneaked up on Bob still walks kind of funny, but that's for him to tell you. And the calculation for that is that every character has a passive perception of 10. Now, on top of that, you can add at any times your wisdom modifier, or if you're proficient in perception, that means that you can add the total for the perception skill. So in Bob's case, Bob's got a wisdom modifier of 2, plus 2 from proficiency because he's proficient. That means a plus 4, and that's a total of 14. If anybody tries to sneak up on Bob and doesn't roll more than a 14, then Bob will have a chance to react. At least that's the basic idea. Now let's go back up a little bit, and slightly to the right, you're going to see armor class. And for Bob and for every character out there, armor class is going to be an important component of your character. Just because it means that depending on this number, you're going to be more or less harder to hit. Bob, in this case, is a fighter. So that means that he has no mechanic that allows him to calculate armor class in a specific way. So unlike the barbarian or the monk, Bob is immortal. And that means that he has to use armor. When you use armor, then you just look at the item description in the player's handbook, and in Bob's case, just because he chose it as a starting equipment, he has a chainmail. Chainmail has a total AC of 16. It's got a few other things written in there, like disadvantage to stealth, but those are less important for Bob, just because he's not as spry as he used to be. But that 16 is going to be the basis of your armor class at all times while you're wearing that armor piece. Moving on, though, if Bob has a shield, then you add the plus 2 from the shield into that calculation, and if, let's say, Bob chose the defense fighting style, then he would have an additional plus 1, ending up at a total of 19. Minus those 2 conditions, let's say Bob is a city guard, so he has to have a halberd. Naturally, obviously, we can move past that stereotype. So, again, he's just gonna have the 16. Right from armor class is initiative, and initiative is, many people will tell you, the most important field of your character. Just because if it ever betrays you, then the whole character sheet kind of has to go certain places. But initiative is generally calculated by the amount of dexterity modifier that you possess. So in Bob's case, that's a -1. Same thing for armor, actually. If Bob doesn't wear his armor, then the armor class total is going to be the dexterity modifier. So -1, but with armor, that makes absolutely no difference to Bob. In terms of initiative, however, it does. And if you're one of those characters who wants to act first, unlike Bob, because Bob, he's seen things, he doesn't care, he goes first or second, he's just gonna do his thing. But if you're not like Bob, then you want to have more dexterity and you want to find other ways to add on top of that. So there are feats, we're gonna be talking about that, and there are other things like spells that might allow you to do that. And then moving past initiative, there's speed right next to initiative. Speed is generally the measurement of how fast you are, and it's derived by your race. So in Bob's case, he's a variant human, which means 30. There are other things that come into play about speed, but the most important thing that you need to remember is that your DM is going to have some kind of a representation of a battlefield. And many of those representations feature a grid, like a hexagonal grid or squares. Every single piece of that grid, every single square or hexagon equals 5 feet. So again, if you have 30, that means you can move 6. It's a very general rule, and especially for melee fighters, but also for people that like to throw spells and use bows, it's kind of important. Right below that, hit point maximum. Now, there are 2 things that come into play here. You're going to see that you have current hit points, and then above that you have a field that says hit point maximum. So the maximum is always the total amount of hit points that you possess. That never changes unless some very special effect is into play. Current hit points equal the hit points that you have right now. So if you're in the middle of combat and you've taken a few hits, you've had a potion, and then your friends are trying to help you, then that's obviously gonna fluctuate. So that field of current hit points is slightly bigger, just to allow you to have enough room to make those calculations, to have the precise number at all times. Right below that is temporary hit points, and Bob likes to have temporary hit points. Why? Because, well, it helps. It helps with all aspects of life for pretty much everybody involved in adventuring. And how do you get those? Well, there are a few spells in the game, primarily by classes that like to help other people, like Cleric, Bard. They can actually add temporary hit points to your pool, or in Bob's case, when he goes off into the night with his buddies to enjoy a good feast, some decent company, then the next morning he might have some temporary hit points just to kind of show something for it. How do you calculate the max? Well, at level 1, you just take the hit dice, which we're going to talk about in a second. In Bob's case, that's a d10, and then you simply add the Constitution modifier and you slap the total in there. For subsequent levels, you have to roll the d10, which is your hit dice, and then whatever you roll, you add the Constitution modifier. Now, your DM is going to have a few ways to do that. Either you're going to roll, or you're always going to have the medium number, which for a 10 is a 6. Kind of weird, but hey, there you go. And, talk to your DM. He or she is going to tell you all that you need to know for subsequent levels. If you are multiclassing, which is not the case with Bob, but it might happen, because, hey, tomorrow he might decide to be a paladin, you never know, Bob has that in him, then that hit dice field is going to be very important. Now, in case you have not multiclassed, then your hit dice is never going to change, so in the big field, you write down D10 in Bob's case, because he's a fighter, but for the total, that mostly equals your level, or actually always equals the total amount of levels that you have in all classes that you have chosen to branch out to. So if you have multiclassed, then a little bit of a modification is going to be necessary. Let's say Bob takes a level in Paladin, he's going to be level 3. So the total amount of hit dice is going to be 3, but the hit dice are going to come from both classes. So in this case, in this particular metaphor, then that's going to be 3d6, or rather 3d10. But if Bob decides to multiclass into a class that has a different hit dice, then they're going to be separate, and they're going to be rolled separately. Next to hit dice are the death saves. And again, very, very important, tiny little piece of your character sheet that may decide your fate. But here's the simple gist of it. Once you go down, you go below 1 HP, then you fall into an unconscious state and you have to battle for your life. The way you do that is by rolling the d20 and adding the Constitution modifier onto that roll. Now, the DM has this little formula that calculates exactly what the difficulty for your roll has to be. If you beat it, you mark a success. If you fail, mark a failure. Get 3 failures. Remember, the DMs always need a favor. If you get 3 successes, welcome back to the world of living. You have 1 HP to your name. Right of that, personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Now, in Bob's case, obviously this is going to be a very, very important piece of the character sheet. Just because Bob he's a personality kind of guy. He likes the simple things in life, much like a gnome, but he also enjoys the more, let's say, shadier aspects of the world. So gambling, cockfights, the occasional theater here and there when he wants to diversify a little bit. Make sure you put that in your character's personality trait, just because even though the background is going to give you some suggestions, you can also come up with your own. Don't be afraid to put more than one thing in there. Yes, it's good to have a simple concept, but that doesn't mean that your character has to be a cardboard cutout. It can have a heart, it can have a soul, and it's good for you to know that you can always identify with that. You can always look at those little fields and go, yeah, okay, so in this situation, Bob would do this. Same for the ideals. Now, ideals kind of, stick to 1, maybe 2 if you want to have this weird alignment. Bonds, kind of important. They might help your DM develop a little bit more of the story. And then flaws. Flaws are very, very important because they're funny. They're hella funny, especially if you have a character that has more than one and role plays well to it. It's just unbelievably cool. Moving along, attacks and spellcasting. Now here is where it begins to get a little bit more weird for people that don't know what this is. They've never done this before, or they've done it a few times and somebody else helped them. If you're that kind of guy, and I'm here to help, attacks and spellcasting is basically meant to describe your weaponry. So name, obviously, let's say Bob has a halberd, and then for attack bonus, just do the calculation and put it in there. So in Bob's case, that's 3 from strength, because halberds don't have finesse. They're just big lumbering pieces of wood and steel. So Bob's gonna use his strength, so that's a 3, plus 2 from proficiency, because he's proficient with the weapon. That's a total of 5. Every time you try to hit whatever in the world, you're gonna roll that d20, add that attack bonus, and try to beat that thing's armor class. Now, damage type, again, for the halberd, that's a 1d10 slashing damage. Put that in there just so that you know every time. It allows combat to flow quickly, and it's just meant to be there to help you along your adventures. As for attacks and spellcasting, that's meant to be an easy access to things that you're going to use on a regular basis. Now, often you're not going to see an actual, let's say, cantrip in there, because there's a separate piece of paper, separate tab, let's say, of the character sheet that you can put those in. But if you're a paladin, right, or in Bob's case, if he gets to level 3 and he gets to be a battle master, he's gonna have maneuvers, and those maneuvers you can actually put in there, like it's a precise strike, or like, I don't know, commanding strike. You can put these in there, and you can always know what they do, how to use them, how many dice you have. For the paladin, you can put in the formula for the divine smite. It's meant to allow you to easily access that information. Right from attacks and spellcasting, you're going to see probably the biggest field, and it's called features and traits. It's the biggest for a reason, and it's meant to kind of push you into the idea that everything that you gain from the book while you're making your character, and then later on, while you're playing the game, your DM is going to give and take certain things to and from you. Mostly give, just because DMs are benevolent at heart, don't forget. So, let's say in Bob's case, you start off as a human. That means that, in our case, that's a variant human. So he's going to have a feat. And just because Bob is a sentinel, you know, he's going to take the sentinel feat. Obviously, that's just his thing. He's got a heart of gold, and that's just who he is. But then moving on, you're gonna put in there certain things from your class. So fighting style, again, depending on what you choose. Second wind, you always get it at level 1 fighter. Action surge, level 2 fighter. Just put those in there. You don't have to write what they are. You don't have to give them little annotations. If you want, you can actually, but mostly this field is meant to remind you of what you can do. And because later on in the game you're gonna have a lot of things, then that's why it's so tall. Left of that is equipment, and you're gonna very quickly notice that there are these 5 weirdly shaped things that are standing right there in your inventory. That's meant for currency. So GP is gold, PP is platinum. Obviously, you get the idea. It's meant for you to be able to segregate your currency and to always have the precise access to it. Equipment, yeah, everything that you get from your background, from your character, from your class rather, in the beginning when you make it, you get to choose your equipment. So put it in there. Put you know, that crowbar, put that lantern, put that simpleton's clothing. Just because you want to know what you have. Number one, number two, you never know when it's going to be useful. You might want to create something, so it's good to have everything laid out. I also put in the armor, the shield, just to kind of know what I get. Now later on, that field starts to get a little cluttered, so you might want to, you know, use a separate piece of paper, or you know, the back of the character sheet usually also tends to work. And then lastly, other proficiencies and languages. Now here's where you put stuff like tools. You know, Bob might level up. He might be a battle master one day. Again, he maybe hopes to be. So he might choose, let's say at level 3, he gets to have a proficiency in tools, and he chooses smithing tools. Excellent. Put that in there, and remember, this is proficiency. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have the item. That's equipment. So if you have 2 things that correspond, that means that you can do very cool things. Languages, like Bob speaks Common and, let's say, I don't know, Dwarven, just because he enjoys the company of dwarves. They drink, they fight, they smith things, so, you know, they're kind of like something to look up to. And then lastly, what else? Well, little things that you might acquire in the world, like let's say your background as a soldier is going to give you proficiency in dice or some kind of a gambling game, so you can put that in there. And then in equipment you might actually have the dice from the background as well. And that's it. Whoever you are, whatever you're about to do, that's the whole character sheet. And feel free to actually use the link in the description. I'm going to put a link to the official D&D site. You can download the entire package. You're going to find the different ones in there. There are variations, and you're also going to find 2 additional pieces of material. That's the supplement, which has, again, character name, but also age, height, weight, eyes, skin, hair. Just things that allow you to visualize your character or someone else. Character appearance, you can put a little picture of Bob right in there. Alliance and organizations, you know, you can kind of have a little bit of a current, let's say, ongoing story that's going on in your adventure. There's a field for character backstory, additional features, and again, treasure for those of us who enjoy that part of the game. And lastly, the spellcasting sheet. We are actually going to take the necessary amount of time to properly talk about spells, but just the gist of it, the 3 fields that you need to pay attention to are right at the bottom, and of course spellcasting class, which Bob is absolutely unproficient in. But let's say that you have a wizard, then put that in there. You know, write down wizard spellcasting class, and then spellcasting ability for wizards, it's intelligence, spell save DC, and spell attack bonus. There are ways to formulate that. Very basic things like 8+ proficiency or 8+ ability score plus proficiency, stuff like that. We're going to be talking about that in a separate video. We're going to devote some time to spells, feats, backgrounds. Those are incoming. So, hope this was useful for everybody involved. I am your very, very humble bartender. I look forward to your communications. Send us your messages, send us your tweets. We are here to answer questions. And once again, DMs need things. So go play and you know, let's see what happens.